Hello and welcome. My name is Marc Blatstein, the physician and founder of Physician Pre-Sentence Report Service. This YouTube is going to discuss different avenues. Prison, most of you are going to be facing prison. You're already in prison. You've been indicted. And there are things you can do that can help you expedite or shorten the amount of time that you're going to be incarcerated or in prison. And so I don't want to lessen the stress of, facing a time in prison because it's a very stressful event. In all transparency, while I have my medical license, it's true. About 20 years ago, I too was convicted of a felony. And I will tell you that it can take someone who friends of mine have told me, yeah, at the time I was arrogant, but it can humble, the biggest of egos. And so it did paralyze me for a period of time. And I probably wasn't the best client. But in hindsight, you need to be able to participate with your client. And so one of the lessons and what I'm going to try and stress throughout this YouTube is participation and being prepared. Preparation is probably the strongest thing that I'm going to try and transmit to all of you. And it was I would say it's the most important event for me that caused me to transition away from patient care and to try and impart the knowledge that I came away with to all of you. I'm not the brightest guy in the world. I was totally unprepared. When the judge asked me at sentencing, and he said that they asked me if I had anything to say. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know what to say. When the judge said he didn't want to see me back in the courtroom, my attorney and I were standing there. I hired someone who was a prosecutor before he became a white collar attorney. And we both heard him. And then we went ahead and asked if we could appeal the indictment. And so not very smart on my part. And so, there are a lot of takeaways that I'm trying to impart to all of you. And so with that being said, there are definitely things that you can do to shorten the amount of time that you will stay in prison. And hopefully some of these takeaways you'll be able to learn. You don't need to write all this down. It'll be on the YouTubes. And so preparation is going to be key. Facing prison is a very real and terrifying event, and it will become even more real as you begin. You're either going to be remanded at sentencing or you self-surrender. If you're lucky enough to self-surrender, then being prepared means that it's possible when you self-surrender that you may be able to go right from when you self-surrender. Using myself again as an example, I appealed the indictment. So my first self-surrender was to a freestanding prison camp, and that was Pensacola. I went down to Florida, no problem. The woman put her arm around me, took me into the office, and I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea. So I was not a happy person the whole time. And at the end, when I was released, we went to appeal. There was no fencing at all down. It's very little. I mean, there was no razor wire or anything like that. It was pretty free movement. The guys down there that were being released from maximum security and working their way down, they told me that, this was a walk in the park. I didn't understand. And so I did the appeal, and the appeal was denied immediately. We should have listened to the judge. He said he didn't want to hear from me again, didn't want to see me again. He sent me back to another camp, but this was a satellite camp. And the satellite camps are attached to higher security camps. And so here I was unprepared, and they stuck me into an isolation cell. I'm claustrophobic. I mean, I wasn't ready for that. And so being prepared to know what to expect before you get into, before you enter a prison or before you go into the sentencing hearing or before you get into the pre-sentence interview, all of these are benchmarks that you need to know. What are stakeholders? Stakeholders are individuals that are responsible for you throughout your term after you're guilty, if you will. And so the stakeholders, these are people that these responsible parties are going to be, for example, your attorney. They know nothing about you at your time. And chances are, hopefully, you've interviewed your attorney the same way you have interviewed when you're in high school, you interview dates. You have to interview your attorney because if you have a federal crime, you want an attorney who practices in federal court, who has done federal cases similar to yours. You need to ask these questions. Then the next person who is going to be a stakeholder is going to be the prosecutor. They're going to want to prosecute you. The Department of Justice, they want you to they have the indictment. And so their indictment of you is their narrative or their story of you that has been all over the press. The probation officer is a representative of the court. They're going to do an interview. They're going to interview you, called the pre-sentence interview. And at the interview, they are then going to, in addition to drafting the official pre-sentence report, they're going to go ahead and when they pass that report to the judge, who is also a stakeholder in your future, they're also going to recommend the sentence and placement to the judge. Not last, but next, after your sentence, the next stakeholder you'll never meet, which is the administrative arm of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, they're going to place you, and they're going to base that on your pre-sentence report. That pre-sentence report is going to follow you for a very long time. When you get to prison, it's going to be your case manager, the warden, and the unit team. All these individuals have a stake in your future as they want to ensure that you reduce your criminogenic need, and they need to do that by observing they watch as you reduce your criminogenic needs. They need you see incremental improvements over a period of time. And so we are going to proceed into this. How does this particularly work? Well, as you get into the first preparation is going to be your preparation is for the pre-sentence interview. So before you get to the interview, in addition to all the information that your attorney has for you to get together, which is all of your medical information, if you have a medical file, you need to have all of that together and ready because it's paramount. You're not going to get a second chance at this. So if you have a big medical file, you need to have treatment plans from all of your doctors. So when you talk to them, you need to have them, in addition to getting copies of all of your prescriptions, you need to ask them specifically for treatment plans for each one of your medical conditions. So it's spelled out that way. You need to have copies of all your blood tests, all of your diagnostic tests. If you have lots of diagnostic tests, no matter if it's CAT scans, CT scans, MRIs, X-rays, you want to get the reports, but you also want to get them in CD or flash drives. It doesn't matter if they're on portals. You need to get the physical copies of operative reports, pathology reports. You want everything. You want to they're going to get copies of your financials. You're going to get copies of your personal identifying information, which is going to be, in addition to copies of your passport, which probably has already been turned in, your driver's license, ID card, birth certificate, which will also make up part of your reentry plan. So all of that. Then you're going to also begin to write a copy of your personal narrative. And your personal narrative is going to be your story And you can go into my website to see what goes into the personal narrative. But right now, your personal narrative, which is your story, has been written by the Department of Justice and is your indictment, which is all over the press. And if you look at your indictment, you appear as America's most wanted. You need to redraft your personal narrative that explains, what you did without making excuses, take responsibility for your actions, explain your remorse. You understand the victim's pain that you caused, the victim's pain where you perpetrated their pain through your criminal actions, and you accept the responsibility for that. But you want to go through this narrative, explains your life from a child, and it goes through. It takes a long time to write, and it's your story from childhood to what caused you to go astray, if you will, and break the law at this particular point in your career. And it's going to take time. You need to have someone to write it with you, or you write it and review it with you. And you don't want people who are going to be enablers for you. You want people who are going to be able to question it for you. And so if you don't have anyone, I'm more than willing to be engaged. If not me, you want to engage someone else, but you need someone who is willing to take the time, because it will take weeks, if not months, to put this report, to write this narrative with you. And it will be written and rewritten until it's distilled to where it's an honest version of your life that presents a true version where you've accepted responsibility. You have remorse for your actions. You've explained what you did without excusing it, and you understand the victim's pain, and you understand that you have to make things right first for your victims, the community, your family, and lastly for yourself. Reentry release plan is also needs to be written, and this we go into also through the website, and part of it is you need the reentry release plan, in part because the judge is going to ask you what's your plan not to come back into the courtroom again. Part of the plan is also going to be make sure you have copies of your basic things, your driver's license and your social security card in it, because your release plan at the very end needs to explain to the case managers and to the residential reentry managers who run the halfway houses, and or will decide if you get time at home confinement, why you need the time. In other words, how you are going to use the time. But you need to put into the reentry plan what you are going to do with your time while you're in prison, so that you can reduce your criminogenic needs. And part of that is you can say that you looked online at the First Step Act programs, which are there to address your criminogenic needs. Additionally, there are character reference letters that you are going to be getting regarding your character from people that have known you for a long time. Additionally, there are assessment questions for the First Step Act. They're called Spark 13 risk assessment questions. And if you can take these 3 or 4 different documents and weave several of them together, your attorney, a week or two, several weeks before your interview, then can share them with the probation officer, and your probation officer then can take all of this information in addition to your financial records, your medical records, your personal identification information, so that they then can begin to fill their probation report. So by the time you sit down with the probation officer, you now have a lot of the information that they need is already filled in. Believe it or not, the probation officers will likely, even they may not say it, but they may be grateful that have a lot of this information already filled in for you. So they can now have time to get to know you personally during the interview. And that's important because with one-on-one time with the probation officer, and they already know a bit about you through your narrative, now you can hopefully begin to speak to the probation officer, and it's possible that by speaking with them and taking some quality time, they then will be able to pass on what they've learned to you, to the judge. And at the time of your sentencing, now the judge will have a different light about who you are. And you've humanized yourself to the probation officer and in turn to the judge before you two have met. And it may affect your sentencing, it may not, but at least your pre-sentence report has now changed the narrative from what the indictment was, and now your pre-sentence report casts you in a more humanized version of yourself as you go forward into the Federal Bureau of Prisons. There's also the pattern score, which is also part of the First Step Act before you actually, they give you the programs to take. And the pattern score is they're hard coded. And so a lot of these, you should get familiar with that, and your attorneys will have that ahead of time. When I'm done with this part of the YouTube, I'll open up the website for you and I'll show you what these assessment questions are, the pattern score, and what all of this looks like, so you'll have a general idea what I'm talking about. Now that you get into the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And so what happens? Well, it just depends. It depends if you surrender, it can be on a weekday or a weekend or a holiday. I don't know that anyone has the crystal ball, but it's possible that you are put into an isolation. I was not expecting it. I was unprepared. You are now prepared that it is possible. But if you are put into an isolation cell, and if it is for several days, what I will go into a little bit later is that you will have, if it's for more than a few days, you begin getting books in the mail. So at least you'll have something to read while you're in there, as opposed to just staring at the wall. And so now that we are in the Bureau of Prisons, you've been into the isolation cell possibly, but you've made your way over into either the low or into the minimum camp. It's a satellite camp or it's a freestanding prison camp. And you're going to sit down with your case manager. So what happens next? The best I can tell you, because when I was incarcerated, there was no First Step Act, is that when you have your first meeting, like people on the outside, some people are nice, some people are jerks. I don't know what it'll be like. But if you're able, the first thing that you will be able to, my recommendation is there are two things you'd like to accomplish. One is that you'd like to be able to see if you can take the First Step Back assessment. That will entitle you to take a First Step Act program so that you can begin to get credits towards, and you start out, as you get credits, there are 10 credits. I believe it's 10 credits per month of programming. The more for each assessment, you get your first assessment, and then on the second assessment, as long as you don't get in trouble, then that 10 credits stays at 10 credits, and through 2 assessments, it then jumps to 15 credits. but I don't know when they will start doing the actual assessment that they consider a qualified first assessment. So the most you can do is ask. So first assessment, the first assessment for the most part on pattern is their hard-coded numbers. And I'll show you what they are at the end of this YouTube. Then the second thing that you're going to ask to participate in is that if you have a financial penalty, the Bureau of Prisons requires, well, they unofficially require you to make, it's called a financial responsibility program. They want you to make payments. So if you think you're going to take into your commissary account $1,000 or more a month, you want to offer $200 a month to your plan for them to take out a month. If you're only going to take in a couple $100 a month, then you want to offer them $25 a month, $25 a quarter. It just depends how much money you have. The reason is that you have to offer something, and then you and the case manager have to agree. Because if you refuse, then that may, I don't know if they can deny, but they can inhibit the amount of earned time credits and early release that you can get for participating in First Step Back programs. You also don't want to have thousands of dollars that you keep in the commissary account. And from what I've read, that means you don't want to keep tens of thousands of dollars in your commissary account, because the Department of Justice really wants to swoop in and take 75%. I don't know if they're going to use it for restitution. I don't know what they're going to do with it, but that's what they want to do. And so it's just a recommendation, but I don't know that it's all that smart to keep that much money in there if they want to come in and take it. It's not law right now because the Bureau of Prisons doesn't want that to happen, because they depend on the profits from commissary, because they use it to pay employees and for other things that they do. Reentry plans. Why is reentry plans important? Well, reentry plans are a big deal because, for one, towards the end of your sentence, case managers want a reentry plan, because they're going to look at that and you're going to be entitled to go to a halfway house. Well, there's more people who want to go to halfway houses than there are beds. And residential reentry managers that run halfway houses, they depend on case managers' recommendations. So who are they going to take? Someone who has a good reentry plan or someone who doesn't? And so, you want to think about that. I mean, it makes sense to me if I was a residential reentry manager and, I'm looking at two files and one person has a reentry plan and one person doesn't. Well, I would take the one who I think will be successful by coming into my halfway house. So now that they're going to give you your case manager, you've taken the assessment, now they're going to offer you programs. So let's say you're a very successful stockbroker, or you're a very successful physicist, or you work on Capitol Hill and you're a congressman. And they're going to tell you, we think this is a class on how to balance your checkbook. Or we're going to give you a class on about how to walk around the track outside. You're going to say thank you on how to balance a checkbook. You're not going to argue. You're going to say thank you. And why? Because you don't want to refuse it. You refuse it, then they're going to say, okay. and they're not going to argue with you, but they're not going to let you participate in the First Step Back programs. So not only do you want to take it and be grateful, but you also want to be able to document the program. Now, how are you going to document the program? Let's say you don't want to document the program. And so today is April 20th, the year 2023. And let's say that let's say on December 20th, 2023, you meet with your case manager and they tell you on April 20th, you were in this class. We don't have a record of it. What are you going to do? How do you prove it? You have health insurance at home, right? You have car insurance, right? You have homeowners insurance, right? You have to get that before you got your home, or renter's insurance. You hope you don't need any of those until you do, and then you're glad you do if you need it, right? What are you going to do here? So you need this as insurance. And so you go to Amazon. Hopefully you're listening to this before you go to prison. So you want to get softback, paperback books from Amazon. They're journaling, documentation, notebooks, something from Amazon with lines on it, but they have to have words, quotes, words on every page. That they can be inspirational words, it can be sports, it can be history, it can be quotes, it can be religious, it can be science, it can be anything, astrology, it doesn't matter. But for every class you take, you want to put the date as soon as you leave the class for that day. We're going to use today, April 20. Put the date, April 20, 2023. Today, whatever today is, I don't know, today's Thursday or Wednesday, today's Thursday. And you're going to put the teacher's name, what they taught, the name of the class, what they discussed, and what you learned, and what you thought of the teacher, and what a good job she did, or he or she did. Not bad, but what a good job. Try and find something that they said that, that made sense to you. Even if it was about balancing a checkbook, anything. And then how the teacher presented it, then the content of the class, and a takeaway that you could use for later on. And it may seem silly now, but as you take these classes, just think about it. 6 months later, there's going to be a lot of these. And so you're going to, and each one will be entered by the date, by the day, by the teacher's name, and then by the content of the class. And at the end of each class, when you're done with that teacher, it's going to be something that you're going to write at the very end, where you're going to make a brief note that you're grateful to the case manager for recommending that you take that class for whatever reason. And then when you go back to that case manager, you don't need to bring them the whole book. You just need to copy the information from that particular span of time. And so they can begin to fill their particular log or whatever they put together for your information, for what you've done. Additionally, I mentioned books. You can go, and I'll show you this afterwards, but you need to have a reentry plan. And remember that if you want to get out early and you want to show that you're reducing criminogenic needs, and it's hard to do the reentry plan before you leave, or before you even get to your pre-sentence interview. For me, I was paralyzed. But in the back of my mind, I had two goals that I wanted to do, and I didn't know how to get to either. One is I did keep a running log of what I was doing all the time while I was in prison. Second, I wanted my license back. And I wanted my license back more. I didn't know how I was going to get it. And I sure didn't tell anybody. So you don't know what doors reading books will help you, but you have a variety of books that you can begin to put together a list of. You have family, friends, paperback books from Amazon, history, life skills, science, math, philosophy, whatever may interest you, art, it doesn't matter, biographies. You want to have two books come in every 3 weeks, let's say, and again, you're reading them, you're rather writing them, the same thing, and they're as they come in every day, daytime, author. So it's going to be a date, the day, the author, and what you've read and what you learned. And this also is beginning to build, and it's all part of your release plan. And again, it builds up over time. And maybe as you're reading this different, variety of different books, no matter what it may be, marketing, business marketing, business, whatever it is, history, it doesn't matter. There may be something that triggers an interest. It could be the internet, it could be whatever it may be, but have it be in different topics. You never know. And I'll show you a list that I have on the website at the very end. Just keep that reentry plan list building and read. Not unless you're going to play basketball and you have a contract with a national team that they're going to pay you $50 million a year when you get out, then that's okay. Then play sports every day, all day. I'm not saying not to go outside because I didn't know what else to do when I was there. But temper it with reading and writing, going to first step back classes, reading these books that you're getting, build a habit. Okay. I have a book there called The Power of Habit. This is a habit that, especially if you don't read a lot, this is going to be a challenge for you to start. But once you start building the habit, it'll be a habit and you'll read. And so I think that in the long run, it will go ahead and be beneficial towards the end, especially if you have a thick reentry plan and you want to get out of prison earlier and the Second Chance Act applies for you. If you are already a successful entrepreneur, then you already read a lot. Guess what? Create a class. In addition, you'll be already reading. You'll be already taking the first step back classes. Create a course, create a curriculum. Organize it into classes that'll last several months and sit down with your case manager. And if they agree, let them take the credit for the class and then start it. It'll be working. It'll work for you. I remember that when I was at the satellite camp, there was a guy there, and it was only recently that I remembered this, who had a 6-year sentence, didn't have really any history of drugs in his background. But he worked very hard. He taught different types of classes. He taught GED. He taught different types of GED classes, math, English. And I guess he was a very big help to the staff. And, when his wife and family would come to visit, they would talk to the staff and they said, he drank a lot. He didn't drink. He's not an alcohol. He never drank in his life, but during the event prior to his arrest, he was drinking a lot at home. He got into RDAP. The staff encouraged it. And so while he didn't want it, eventually he acquiesced. So the staff helped him. And between that and RDAP, and it works in your favor. So it was totally out of left field. So you never can tell what's going to work for you. If you have your GED, you don't have college, starting in July of 2023, The Second Chance Act added Pell Grants. You can go online and look up Pell Grants through the Biden administration, but you can also go to my website and just go into the search part and Google Pell Grant, and you can actually pull up the colleges and universities where you can go see the list and then write to them and see if if the grants are available to you, because they're online. And I believe you can get to use them at no charge. And so all of this is available to you. And again, I come back to, if you want to get out early, have your release plan, have your narrative, look as good as you can before you get into prison to your case managers and your unit team. You can, when you go to the website, you'll see that you can also see that there is the Minnesota Department of Corrections has a National Institute Corrections Manual, and you can see their correction, you can see the corrections manual there, and it will tell you the different parts of the plan of what to do. And I'll see if I can open that up to you also. And lastly, before I go open up the website, once you're in a halfway house or you're on home confinement and you're out of halfway house, but you're on supervised release, let's say you want to go somewhere. You have an errand, a doctor's appointment, you're going to visit a relative, or they said you have permission to go someplace, or you're waiting for permission is a better example. And you haven't heard back, with permission to do whatever you want to do. Don't assume that you have permission, because you don't. You need to get the okay verbally, and then ask if you need to have it in written form, either via fax or email. Because you haven't heard anything doesn't mean it's okay to go, because they can quickly send you back into the Federal Bureau of Prisons or into a detention center or who knows what. So always err on the side of caution. So now let me see if I can open up this stuff for you. And let's see. All right, let's share the screen. And I got that. All right. So the first one, this is the website. Hopefully we're looking at it. So you go to the website, PPRSUS.com. Then the first tab here is where I am. So the first thing I'm going to show you, documenting. Why do you want to document every class you take? Is because this is a legal case that was denied, where the person, let me open it up for you. Let's see if we can do that. The legal case, well, hopefully it opens. Okay. Petitioner thinks he owned 365 days of first step back credits, but the BOP said he only earned 75. If it wasn't documented, if he had documented everything, then maybe he would have had something to go into court with. But you can read this on your own, but obviously it wasn't there. Next, this is what the hard-coded pattern score looks like. I'm just going to show you for men. Women is the same. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So essentially, it is strictly hard-coded, or when you're first going in, your age older means that you're going to score better. Walsh Act is child stuff. Violent offense, If you had a violent offense, that's going to be a problem. Criminal history points. This you should know with your attorney because it's part of your charge. History of escapes. Well, you're not in prison. History of violence. That will be potentially, I'm not sure if this is before prison or while you're in prison. Education. This is going to depend whether you have a GED or not. Drug program status, you're not in prison, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All these are incident reports. And so these don't, you're not in prison, so that's not applicable. FRP, Financial Responsibility Program. Remember I said, if you refuse, it's not a good thing. These are programs completed, First Step Back programs, and then work programs. Again, this is not applicable. But this is the hard coding part of the pattern program. Then this is the policy statements for First Step Back programming. Essentially, the reason I have these here is that the staff have to recommend you take a program for that program to be, for you to essentially get credit. In other words, you can sign up and take programs, but unless they were recommended for you, they're not counted for credit. The assessment, let's see, yeah, the Spark 13 assessment, which you're able, especially if it's before your pre-sentence interview, it makes sense to me to read this over, understand the questions ahead of time so that you're ready and they can be part of your narrative. And so these are the questions. This is a self-assessment audit, inmate interview form. I guess that's part of an interview. And here it's just how familiar are you with the First Step Back, what's your understanding. Well, you can go through the First Step Back. I just showed you both of the policies that you can pull them up. But this is the interview. This is where this is maybe paper and pen or paper and pencil, or this could be on the internet their True Links form. And this is where the staff interviews you. And this is the one of the forms that I just showed you. And this form is for those that have a pattern score that is not low or minimum, but is high or medium, where they have alternative benefits, which means they can't get out early, but they have alternative type of benefits, which there are incentives. And so you can look that over, but that may not apply to you. Then the next thing is, I believe this one. Oh, and this is books. This would be on let's come up here to the top and then I'll bring it down. This is the third on my website, and then I'm going to bring it down. And this is there's a lot of books. The Power of Habit. I mean, this is a great book. 3 Laws of Performance. These are great books. Some are old books. Think and Grow Rich has been around since forever. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. There's actually a program in the prison that is based off of this book. But you can also look here. It's by business. So these are, there are multiple books here, but when you look at these books, they have little synopsises of each book. So this is kind of what I'm thinking that each of you can do as you write a book. These are historical biographies, life skills, etc. So I hope you found all of this helpful. And should you want to, engage my services, that would be great. I'd love to speak with you. The conference call's on me to start. And if not me, then someone else. But preparation is the most powerful thing that I hope to impart to all of you today. Again, thank you for taking the time to listen. Stay safe, and I hope you have a good day.